You're listening to the Popoto Pub Final Fantasy XIV podcast with your host, Popo Jagaimo.
All right, well, lolly ho, everyone. Welcome back to the 9th episode of the Popoto Pub Final Fantasy XIV podcast. I'm so excited to be here with my guest today, Stout Helm. Stout Helm, thank you for being here with me today.
Hey, it is a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, it's so cool to be able to connect with so many new Final Fantasy XIV content creators like myself. I started my journey just about, I want to say it's just about 6 months now. October 28th was the beginning of my YouTube journey on this channel. And so you've got a much longer history in YouTube. So care to tell the people who you are and what you do and how you got into YouTube and then also how you got into Final Fantasy?
Sure. So I've been doing YouTube for a little bit. I started doing YouTube in the summer of 2019 when a card game came out by Capcom. It was called Tekken. It's still a thing. It was like a real-time card game, and I got into it, and I was like, nobody's really doing content for this. And I was looking for some creative fulfillment. I have a video production background. That's what I do professionally, and I was just trying to figure out how to work a hobby into it. So I started covering videos on that, and did that for a long time. And I've always wanted to break into doing something a little more mainstream. And I've been into Final Fantasy for many years. In 14, I've been playing since A Realm Reborn came out, like off and on. And I tried doing just like standard guides, but it wasn't really fulfilling me. And kind of the tipping point was when Endwalker was about to come out. A friend of mine and I were having a discussion about how people don't really understand Zenos as a character and what he's supposed to be. And so I wanted to make a video just kind of explaining how he's so misunderstood, and it did kind of okay. And then Endwalker came out, and in my mind, I think it shot Zenos way up in terms of villainy and characterization. And this is a hill I will die on. And I was like, okay, I'll make a part 2 to this video because people had asked for it. And it got popular. So I said, okay, I'll do another one. What's something else I want to talk about? I see people saying Medion is at fault for the final days. Well, that's not true. Let's talk about this. And then it just kind of spiraled into, hey, can you talk about this? Well, sure I can. And it's just kind of blown up from there, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely serving a niche within the Final Fantasy XIV community that me coming from Warcraft, so longtime World of Warcraft vet. Sorry for all those people who are sick of me saying it.
Me too. It's okay.
So, and I was deep into that community. I was a World of Warcraft podcaster for a number of years, and lore was one of the biggest things that I was into. And when I came over to 14, one of the things I found very surprising, as rich as the story is that there weren't very many YouTube channels covering the lore of the game, at least at that kind of large level that say, your Bellulars, your Nobles, your Pyromancers, even back then, because he was all about tinfoil hat lore speculation in Warcraft before he had the epic gamer moment, and Akalon before he started turning into just nothing but World of Warcraft rage. He was very much into the speculation realm and on terms of the lore for Warcraft as well. And I felt like there was a void there. And so, with Elio from the Eorzean Archives and now you also doing these kind of very different takes on how to tell the story of the lore of Final Fantasy XIV, it's, I think, something that's been really needed in the 14 community.
There's a lot of smaller set, which I think is great because in a lot of ways, I think smaller channels deliver some really top tier content because they don't have to adhere to so many of the unwritten and unspoken rules of the algorithm. They can just kind of do whatever they want. And there's a lot of really great smaller channels out there that have been doing that, like the Eorzean Archives. I watched that episode; it was great, by the way. I love how you just pick people's brains that are doing content that are in a similar vein. Like when you reached out to me, I was like, I hadn't visited your channel before, and then I saw these other episodes. I'm gonna go watch all of these. And so if I would go out and do something, like if I was taking care of the yard or doing chores around the house, I'd listen to an episode. And it's just, I don't know. It's cool to get to, I appreciate that you do this because you get to see a little bit more behind these people who are doing these really well put together lore videos. And I think you're right. There is a niche for that stuff that can be filled. And I think more people are starting to fill because there's a definite interest for it.
Mm-hmm. I think the interesting thing with, making a channel that's kind of like dedicated towards the lore of 14 compared to say like Warcraft is the story in 14 is very much there for you to consume. They go through the whole process of the story. Yes, there's little tidbits in there, and I've got quite a few questions later on to ask you once we fully delve into spoilers and everything else. We'll talk about Zenos, we'll talk about the 12, we'll talk about all kinds of different things in there. So there are nuggets, that allow for speculation. But the thing with, I think, the Warcraft channels was that, look at Nobble, for example. Are you familiar with Nobble?
Yes, very much so.
So he was basically like telling the story that was in the game in a better way than the game told the story. Whereas the story of 14 is told very well within the context of the game. But I think that also leaves, the story's just so much more heavy, right? I think I compared this to on the last episode with V when I was talking about, like, when I go back and look at the Warcraft story now, it's just there's some depth and nuance there, especially in the books and some of the expanded lore and whatnot. But it's more or less Michael Bay Transformers, whereas this is much deeper than that.
Early on, and I know this is such a cliche thing to say that Wrath was like the epitome of Warcraft, but I mean it really was, especially in terms of storytelling. That was when a lot of the the really interesting story threads were put to bed, and the team's been through some changes. But you're right, and the thing about Final Fantasy is they do tell it in a very interesting way. And it also has the benefit of it just keeps getting better. Like Shadowbringers was, I don't want to, I mean, I will say a huge leap. Not that Stormblood was bad by any means, but Shadowbringers was very well done, compelling storytelling, which is hard to do. And Endwalker was on a similar level. And there's just so much there that it's easy to forget some of the story beats that have happened and some of those threads that have been made that I feel like is really important to talk about, because it's very easy to forget, oh, well, this character actually interacted with this character, or, oh, no, we actually know this. It was just mentioned 3 years ago, and it's just kind of been hanging out there. So there's a lot to consume and retread, especially for people who you get to those parts of the story where it is a little bit slower. Like when you finish a Realm Reborn and you're doing the in-betweens between Heavensward, and it's a little slow, and you finish the main story of Stormblood, and now it's a little slow again. But just being able to pick up on those little threads and make connections, even back to like 1.0, which I think is just super interesting. The story of the game being a revival is just so cool.
The thing, I mean, comparing Warcraft to Final Fantasy's story, the thing that I always think about it is, yes, there's a very rich and complex world that's built with Final Fantasy 14. I think the world, and this might be a controversial take, the world building in World of Warcraft is quite good in terms of like the setting, the different cultures, all these different things. They're very distinct. They have very, and because you have these kind of fantastical races like the Tauren and the orcs and the trolls and the elves and all these other things that are very distinctly visually different from one another, it creates this kind of compelling world. But what I think Warcraft's not good at is telling a small, like, I want to say, Endwalker especially, but Shadowbringers as well. Those are very personal, intimate stories.
Right.
About you and your journey with your friends, whereas Warcraft, your character is pretty much not there at all.
Yeah. It's, and the games are, they're structured differently. And in terms of story, it's probably unfair to make those comparisons, even though we're gonna do it anyway.
That's
but
what
you're
Pocket's
right,
for,
and,
right?
Exactly. But yeah, those little nuanced, intimate stories where you can really, when you develop a sense of, I really care about what happens to these characters and where they go. Whereas in Warcraft, at least in a long time, I can't say that I felt like, man, I'm really connected with this character's story on the same level that I am like the twins, or I'm gonna say Istinian, and most people are gonna roll their eyes, but I love that guy. And Zenos especially, you know, the ancients that everybody love. You know, there's so many characters that people can pick out and say, I care about what happens to this person. And it's those little threads that keep them going. And I'm hoping with 6.1 we'll establish more of those threads with new stuff.
Yeah, I hope so too. One of my big fears, and I don't want to get too spoilery just yet, but one of my big fears was that we were going to leave all those characters kind of behind at the end of 6.0. And after seeing the 6.1 trailer, I was like, thank goodness. When I first saw it, I was like, holy cow, thank goodness they're still here with us. So I have my fears about, you know, what might happen. And, you know, 6.1 launches 2 days from now. So if you're listening to this in the future, we're recording this before 6.1 launches.
Right.
But you know, I'm so glad that we're going to continue that journey with all of them, because, you know, the ending kind of left things up a little ambiguously, like we might be splitting off and kind of doing our own thing for a while. But I'm glad that the crew's getting back together.
I think there will be like, it'll be like people like come and go a little bit. Like we'll be bouncing around between different people, which I think is the right way to go. I mean, we're not on this unified, everybody's got to be together front anymore. The world ending threats are for the moment are put to bed. So, you know, these smaller little intimate more world building stuff is what I'm excited for. Because I mean, Emmett Selk was right. There's so much about the star that we don't know. And those are the things that I want to, you know, it's cool that we traveled to the literal edge of the universe, but, you know, I'm excited to scale things down a little bit because things have been high stakes for a very long time.
Yeah. And I am too. I mean, I'm excited. I think, you know, my favorite moments in the game, yes, the big grandiose moments are nice and fun and everything, but, you know, the moments that stick out to me the most are just those small character moments where you're just there with other people, and I don't want to say other people, other NPCs, but you know, your scions and everyone else, that your friends in the game, which are legitimately your character's friends. It's just those little moments mean everything, because they make all the big moments so much more impactful and great from that perspective. So before we you know delve too far down that rabbit hole into stories where we can talk fully in spoilers, I don't want to give anything away for people that might be listening to this and not not through the MSQ just yet. Let's talk about just Warcraft really quick. So I didn't actually realize, because looking at your channel and I saw the Teppen card game stuff that was there, and I was like, maybe this guy doesn't have any history with Warcraft, which is completely okay. But it's always fun to be able to talk with a Warcraft refugee about, you know, what happened, why did you leave the game? Like, when did you decide? Are you still playing Warcraft? Did you quit?
I don't know that I'll be totally frank. I don't know if I'll ever go back. But it was a huge chapter of my life for a long time. I started playing Frozen Throne when I was in high school, and that's when Warcraft came out, and I was coming off of Final Fantasy XI, which does have a very special place in my heart, but it is very much it's a second job, as opposed to a casual, which Warcraft could be as casual or as serious as you wanted. And so I played that with some friends off and on for a long time, like doing in-game raiding and, you know, through Burning Crusade, and then Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm kind of fell off, but I'd always come back for like each expansion. But I just feel like the experience is not being driven in the most consumer friendly way. I feel like it's become, you know, for the longest time, it was the staple. All the other MMOs that were coming out, you know, in years following were trying to copy it. And I feel like it's kind of become its own demon in terms of how cookie cutter can we get? How much can we time gate things? How little story and content can we provide, but still keep our subscribers on board? Now, I do pay attention to what's happening, like with the stories and the patches, and yeah, I watch a little bit of Asmongold from time to time, so I'm like kind of in the loop of what's going on. But I just don't feel like the magic that made it special, and it could be a product of the times, but I just don't feel like it's in the same place that it was, you know, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Warcraft 3 and Frozen Throne were just a huge part of my high school years too. I mean, it was first game I ever played online. So that was the first time I remember just grinding out matches, trying to get those stupid portraits. You know how you got the upgraded
Oh
portraits
yeah,
from online, and that
yeah.
just at first when I saw it, I'm like, well, that's dumb. Why would anyone want to work hard to get that portrait? And then I, delved fully into it. And the first guide I ever wrote online was a Warcraft 3 Tauren Kodo Beast Rider strat for the Horde in Warcraft 3. And yeah, I mean, it was just such a big part of my life, moving forward. And I agree, one of the things, it took me a while to see it because I used to be, up until I want to say May, June, something like that. I was the biggest Warcraft apologist or World of Warcraft apologist and Blizzard Entertainment apologist there was. I would have, Taliesin makes all the jokes about being a shill man. I was probably a bigger shill man. I just didn't have as big of a platform as Taliesin did. And obviously the lawsuit had an impact on some of my decision, but I wasn't having fun with the game for a long time period, before that. And I look back and I say, how many games did I miss out on because I was just, stuck in the Warcraft loop,
Oh yeah. I and and it's easy to dislike Blizzard now, or
Yeah.
Activision Blizzard, I guess,
Yeah.
because of everything that's happened. But it is, it's fair to say that the quality of the game has been dipping steadily over the past several years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm right there with you. I can I remember taking nights in college. I remember I would set aside 2 nights because we were raiding. My girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, she remembers that we that I would tell her, I'm like, hey, this time and this time I'm going to be unavailable because I'm raiding. And she understood because she's fantastic. And I remember, just missing out on other releases and stuff like that because I was so into it. But all my friends were too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the social aspect was a big part of it. Just like the same way. The reason I came back to A Realm Reborn was because all of my friends were like, is this actually going to be good? Because I played in the open beta of 1.0 and
Oh,
it was
wow.
not good. It was not good at all. I remember booting that up and because I was a huge, as much of work as 11 was, I loved it. Like I still love that game. That's why I throw music for it in a lot of my videos, just because I just can't get enough of it. But I was looking for that like similar comfy experience, and at one point I was like, "This is not it. I'm not going to play it." And then all these news articles start coming out about how they're going to end the world in this game and they're going to restart it, and it's going to be this new thing. I was like, "This is crazy. There's no way it'll be good." And my friend's like, but everybody else is saying it's good. So, okay, well, we have to play. And then it was good. It was so good that I just couldn't stop.
Yeah. I gave Final Fantasy 14, A Realm Reborn, a couple shots very early on during A Realm Reborn, and then again, like at the very beginning of Heaven's Word. And I logged in, was like, this isn't Warcraft, and like kind of just logged out because I got frustrated because new systems, new icons, and I was like, I just don't want to learn something new.
Yeah.
And even though there were a couple people, a friend of mine that worked at GameStop that was like really big into it, a couple other people that I knew, but I just couldn't. I don't know. I just couldn't commit to it in those early days, and I kind of wish I had. Because it wasn't until, Shadowbringers was coming out and everyone was hyping it up and talking about how great, how great the game's gotten and everything. And I'm like, well, I want to try something different because I'm playing WoW, but I'm not having fun with WoW. And then, I jumped in at the end of Stormblood and MSQ'd it and just started leveling alts and then played through Shadowbringers 5.0, was blown away by it. But I was still in that Warcraft conditioning, right? Like you got to do your dailies, you got to do your chore ghast, you got to do all these other things. You got to just keep up. And I just didn't have, with my life, I just didn't have time to commit to another MMO. I'm like, well, I'll just play the story when it comes out. Was how I was treating 14. And it makes me think of other MMOs too. I don't know if you played any other ones, but I played SWTOR when it came out, Star Wars: The Old Republic.
I that too.
A good bit when it came out because I'm a big. I don't want to say, I don't know. These days it's harder and harder to be a Star Wars fan, but back in those days,
it depends on the material. But SWTOR had a great story.
I should say I'm a big Old Republic fan. Like I love that era.
See, now that's okay. Me too. Me too, friend. Yeah.
I wish it was still canon, but
Oh, I know. Yeah, SWTOR had a fantastic story. They just didn't at the very beginning. They didn't know there was no end game. Once you
mhm,
finished the story, there was nothing to do. Like you either queued into PvP, which that's what I did because they didn't even have
yeah.
they didn't even have like alliance level content at that time. So you were just queuing up for Hutball or
I
whatever the
loved
one was
Hutball.
on the snow planet. Yeah, I remember Hutball, but I would get so ticked because I played a Sith Marauder and you could just get CC'd all day, and then it was just like, why am I playing this? The story's over with, and then I stopped. But yes, I have played other MMO. I've played some weird MMOs too. Like everybody had their RuneScape phase,
I
even if it was
didn't.
very
I have
short. You
never
never had a
touched
RuneScape
RuneScape.
phase?
No, I have never ever touched
I think
RuneScape.
you're an outlier. I mean, I didn't have like a long one. It was very short, but because
Mhm.
it was free, and so like I had a RuneScape phase. I played another one, which is I don't even know the country that it's developed out of. But have you ever heard of Tibia? Have you ever heard of this?
I think I've heard of it. I've never touched it though.
So it's a free to play, but you could buy like like a premium account, and it had its own client. But the graphics were you should look into it. The graphics at the time were hilariously bad,
Hmm.
and it was notorious for if you were killed in game. Outside of a safe zone, if you were killed, you dropped all your stuff, and whoever killed you could
Oh,
take all your stuff. And I put myself through that experience because it was free because I was a kid and I had no money, but I wanted to play online games. So I played that. Did you ever play WildStar?
no. I wanted to, but by the time I kind of convinced myself that I'd wanted to try it, it was already like shutting down. And
Yes.
and even though people seemed to love it, and they were just baffled by the fact that it was getting shut down.
I believed in the hype. I was like, this is going to channel what Warcraft gave for me when I was a kid, and I'm going to love this. And some of the design decisions were, I mean, it was fun, but it was insane. It was very difficult in terms of how they tuned content. And at one point, just it felt very punishing. And that's when me and my friends lost interest. And then not too long after that, it's like, oh, game's dying. But it was
Yeah, I
fun
mean,
for a little bit.
to me, the way I think, I actually really liked SWTOR, because I was playing it mostly as a casual story progression. It was just, to me, it was just another BioWare game, and I was just really all about that. And the fact that I had 8 campaigns to play through was just such an incredible value to be able to have these 8 different stories to play through with fully voice acted cinematics and dialogue choices and everything else. And you had your Paragon, Renegade, or Sith Light, Dark Side, Light Side,
Yeah.
modification. It had all those same things from KOTOR, and it was a lot of fun. And I always loved Final Fantasy games, so it's amazing that I never really got into 11. I think because my parents didn't have good internet at the time, and so I bought it, I owned it, but because we were still on dial up, it was near impossible to play, and so it just kind of passed me by.
Yeah, we had really spotty. We kind of lived like out in the sticks, kind of out in the boonies. We had really spotty DSL, and the signal would come straight from this tree line. And if it was windy or stormy, and there was a lot of movement in the trees, the signal was like nada.
Mm.
And I remember playing, and it was very. There was no way that you could have a solo experience with 11. There was, but there were always things that had to be done in a group. And because optimization was a thing, certain jobs did not get chosen for groups. And sometimes you'd spend like hours waiting for a group, and the group would be together for an hour and you didn't even have a level to show for it. Or you would die and you would lose experience, the group falls apart, and then it was a very grueling experience. It's a unique experience. It was modeled more after EverQuest than it was anything else because it preceded Warcraft.
Yeah.
But it is I've played on private servers like off and on over the years, and it's still fun, I guess. But SWTOR was also a very unique experience in that, and I had a very good friend of mine. He played Warcraft with us, but he didn't raid or anything. He just played it because we played, and he loved SWTOR because there was no pressure. It was just you were playing a BioWare game. You were getting the single player experience, and it was really good.
Hmm. And that's why I
I'm
think
told it's still good.
I've heard it's good for a single player game, like just play the game
Yeah.
single player, but I don't know about the end game or anything else like that, and it's obviously free to play now, so there's probably lots of weird monetization things in it. But um,
Yeah.
I've been, there's part of me that wants to give it another shot, or give it, because I didn't ever play through all the different campaigns, so maybe play through a campaign. But it's nice to know that it's still out there. I hope that it continues on, for a while to come, because I don't think we're getting another Star Wars MMO anytime soon. Is just my guess.
Probably not. I think the only thing that we can hope for is that the Knights of the Old Republic remake is good.
Is good. Yeah. Yeah. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed on that. So
Yeah.
weird though that Sony got that, by the way.
It is weird, but I'll try to be optimistic. You
Yeah.
never know. Might be good. Might be good. But
Yeah. I
speaking
had,
of dial-up,
oh yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you qualified as an MMO, but the Fantasy Star Online's for the GameCube and the Dreamcast. Did you ever play any of those?
No, I never played either of those either.
That was like my first online game experience, and I remember my parents getting so mad because for the GameCube, you had a broadband adapter that you'd put in the bottom of the GameCube, and you'd run your broadband jack or your dial-up jack, which was from your phone line, to that, and that's how you connected. And I will never forget the number of times that I would hear somebody shouting at me from downstairs because I had the line tied up because I was playing PSO, like all hours of the day.
Uh,
And
the good
now,
the good old days, right?
oh man, kids today don't know how good they have it in terms of online games. The hoops we
Or,
had to jump through.
or just entertainment online and access to
Yes.
different forms of entertainment. But no, I mean, I feel like 14, the reason that I've really fallen in love with it, after this kind of journey through mostly Warcraft, but delving into different MMOs until, more recently just decided to quit WoW and make 14 my main MMO, is just like what you said about your friend. There's no pressure, and there's plenty to do at endgame without the pressure. And I think the thing that just burned me out of WoW that I just didn't want to do anymore was just the constant power grind systems thing. And there just didn't really feel like there was anything else to really do at the end game other than if you wanted to PvP or if you wanted to raid and do mythic pluses.
Yeah,
And
there's not. Or you're leveling alts or
yeah,
uh, whatever
which
else there is to
I had
do.
already
But
accomplished that because I had everything, capped. So, keeping everything capped was easy.
yeah, yeah,
And so it became something where it was like, okay, well, the only way to play this, the only way to play with my friends, who were, many of whom were still there, was if I, try to keep up as best as I can. And I could do it on one character, but then when they started throwing all the RNG stuff on top of that, and lowering the amount of loot that you got out of raids and lowering the amount of loot that you got out of mythic pluses, and it was like, what are they,
yeah.
what they're just extending the grind. And it became honestly a chore. And I never really enjoyed running mythic pluses because, or mythic rating for that matter, even though I did it, it becomes less about the communication between the friend group and it becomes more about the task at hand. And I don't feel like, being in a mythic raid group, I never felt like I developed the bonds that I developed when I was like normal or heroic raiding back like in Cataclysm or back in Wrath, or doing 10 or 25 in Wrath.
Yeah.
Because
It's
it's just task at hand. If you're goofing off, if you're trying to have fun, cut it out because you're being
yeah.
inefficient with our time.
It's very high pressure, and it's not something I would ever want to do. And I played in Legion, so I'm familiar with it. But it's not something I would ever want to do outside of my friend, like a core friend group. And people are very picky about who they bring and like what your rating is and like your completions um and I, some people may not like it when I say this, but the Warcraft community is much less forgiving than the Final Fantasy XIV community.
Oh yeah.
100%. It's another hill I will die on. If you make mistakes, you're going to hear about it from somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to be nice about it, or the group just falls apart. And I feel like Final Fantasy, and whereas there's not a system like Mythic Plus, which I think is fine, but you're more than likely to run into somebody who is going to go that extra mile to coach you, as opposed to just tearing you down for doing something wrong.
Right. Or not even doing anything wrong, just tearing you down for being new. Like the
Oh
barrier
yes.
to new players, if you're a new player and you just, boosted a character because they give you a free boost, and you're even running the level, what is it now, 51 dungeon, the very
Yeah.
first dungeon of Shadowlands, and you're just kind of trying to learn your rotation, you will get chewed the heck out. And
hmm
they'll try to kick you. I've seen it happen many times where there's a new player in a group, they'll kick them because they're not making their stupid normal dungeon run as fast as they want it to so that they can level their alt.
I've
And
had that in Duty Roulette too, and it's not as often by any
and
means.
you've had that in Duty Roulette in 14?
Yes,
Oh
it's
wow.
not that often, but I remember one distinct experience. I was playing White Mage, I was leveling it, and we had a Sprout tank that was tanking. It was a Heavensport dungeon,
Mhm.
and he wasn't wall to wall pulling, which I don't care. It doesn't bother me. And
Yeah.
there were times I was not comfortable wall to walling.
I only
And
recently,
this
within the last 3 months, got comfortable wall to wall pulling.
Yeah, it's if you're not comfortable, then you do not have to do it. It is not a requirement. And I had mentioned to him, I said, if you want a wall to wall, I will keep you alive. If you do not want to, that is okay. That's what I said because I don't care.
Mhm.
But this one DPS got really bent out of shape about it and was like, if we're not wall to walling, then what are we even doing here? And I was like, you can drop. Your queue
Yeah.
will be a heck of a lot longer than ours will, but you can drop.
I'm
And
hoping that was a
glad that
Warcraft refugee, not
oh,
a
it
Final
probably
Fantasy
was.
14 native.
And I'm glad that those experiences are few and far between because
Mhm.
it's more. I mean, I've run dungeons where you have to tell the tank, hey, you have a stance that if you turn it on, monsters will hit you more. And they'll be like, oh, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Because there are some things that aren't explained as well, especially if you don't go out of your way to do the whatever the tutorial dungeon is. I forget the name.
I forget what it is too.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
It
I know.
gives
Gives you good
uh,
experience. I did it a long time ago, so
yeah,
yeah.
but like if you didn't do that, and if you're not reading every single tool, it's easy to miss something. So
Yeah.
that's another reason I play Final Fantasy 14. Community is fantastic. They're great.
Have you delved into, so I haven't, but have you delved into Savage or Extremes or Ultimates or any of that harder,
Yes,
end game stuff?
I'm on a break right now because the schedule just is not consistent enough to allow me to do it. But there for a while I was with a few of my friends. We put together a Savage group, but I'm out of it. But I do like the Savage content. I like the comparison from Warcraft where it's not like a full dungeon for the Savages. It's one fight. I like that they're complex, but once you get some practice in, and I've pugged and had some positive experiences. So it is fun, but I am taking a break. And what's great about the break is, unlike in Warcraft, I, I don't feel bad that I'm not always capping my stones every single week because I mean, just with the lay of life is, it's just been super busy, and I've decided to focus on making these videos. So it's like, I'm gonna go record footage instead of running duties. But yes, I have done not I haven't completed P3 or P4S, which I'm fine with. But I am excited for the new raid that's coming out.
Yeah, and I mean the one thing I really like, I haven't done Savage, but the one thing I like about the system too, smaller groups in general.
Yes,
8 man I think is the perfect number of people for a raid group. I know alliance raids are 24, but aside from there's 24 person, are the extremes and ultimates, are those 24 or are those just 8 people too?
those should just be 8.
Okay,
The
so
extremes, because like the extreme for Heidelin was just 8
all the alliance raids then are just kind of
or
casual
20. Right.
content for 24. So that's
Yeah.
nice because it then takes away all that. Well, you got to find 20 or 24 other people, like for Mythic, in Warcraft. You got to find
Yeah.
20 people, all of whom are carrying their weight at all times, and that becomes a very
And
difficult
that's
schedule
hard.
managing task and everything else.
That was a pain in Vanilla WoW because that was back when it was 40-man content. And I can honestly say that most 40-man raids, not all 40 people were paying attention. You had about 30 people doing the work and about 10 people screwing around. So yes, 8 is a very nice number. It makes it so you don't feel like you're sitting in Party Finder for forever trying to fulfill most of your roles. I think it's a good happy medium. I like the way Endgame is structured in Final Fantasy. I like it a lot, actually.
Yeah. So aside from that, what does your Final Fantasy 14 end game look like? What else do you enjoy doing at the end game?
I'm a glamour junkie. I'm the type of person who, if I see somebody walk past me with an outfit I think is cool, I will follow them and examine them. And if I don't know where a piece came from, I'm either going to look it up or I'm the type of person to send you a tell like, I love your glamour. Where'd you get that chest piece? And most people are always like, hey man, thanks. I got it from here. And like, okay, I know what I'm going to be doing the next hour. I'm running this dungeon until I get this drop. And then I get bored with it after a week and then I have to make a new glamour. I like doing the glamour stuff. I like just leveling alts and just I like doing frontline. I think frontline is fun, even if
Really?
it's kind of yes, I do think it's fun. I
Hmm.
do think it's fun.
What do you like about Frontlines? Because spoiler alert, I personally don't. I did them every day until I got everything capped, and then I'm like, I don't want to do the frontline roulette anymore. But
Well,
what do you enjoy about Frontlines?
Well, it's great EXP, so everybody should do it.
Yes.
The queues are fast depending on the time of day you do it. Very fast,
Especially
queues,
for those
even
DPS jobs. Like that's a must do once a day.
Yeah,
for leveling.
I'm leveling. I'm on the tail end of having Dragoon capped right now, so I do it every day. I don't mind it. I like this kind of this format of big groups working together, big group PvP style combat. The move switching, like how your actions end up getting a lot shortened, is kind of weird, but I still think it's a lot of fun, especially when you get a group that is very organized, because you will get people who they have macros set up for this frontline map that you have just queued into, and they are going to communicate your way to victory. And I don't know, I think it's fun. I like big battles and DPS. It's fun to just one beneficial thing of it is if there's one job you really, really like, but you're like, I don't want to play this in PvP, you don't have to. You queue in as whatever job it is, and then when the match is starting, switch to whatever job you want to play.
Yeah, I know that
very flexible.
People have done that. The thing that I always don't like about Frontline specifically is that it's Zerg Rush, right? I know there's strategy and there's pincer moves. I shouldn't say it's Zerg Rush. It feels a little like RTS, like Total War type of thing, where your character is just like one of the grunts, so to speak. And I don't feel like I have enough agency as an individual player there, because if you're, let's just say there's 2-3 people sitting on capping a node, and the whole Zerg Rush ball comes at you, there's nothing you can do. Like you're just gonna get swallowed up by the tide, which is admittedly how war can kind of be if that happens, in war. But it doesn't. I don't feel like I have those hero ball moments where it's like I can kind of turn the tide of a battle by myself, and that
like
kind
you
of
do in other modes.
That kind of bugs me a little bit. I honestly like the concept of Frontlines. I like the maps. I like the node capping and everything. I just wish it wasn't. Part of me wishes it wasn't 3 teams. It was 2. I think if it was 2 teams of 24, I would feel like it was less congested for that reason. And I also think that, if you had to do 3 teams, cut it down to 8 per team. And I think that would make a much different, but I for me at least, it would feel like a much better experience, I think. But
they are trying to do new things. They've got that new mode that's coming out that's 5v5. I'm interested to see, because there are some PvP modes that are just like straight up dead. Like, because PvP it's not the primary thing people go to for 14. So, but I like that they're willing to experiment with new stuff.
Well, I mean, and I think they have that freedom of being able to experiment with something, because it's not the most popular thing in the game.
Right.
So they can choose to sideline. What are they sidelining right now? Rival Wings.
Yeah, Rival Wings, which like nobody's doing right now.
I mean, imagine if Warcraft decided, like, we're going to shut down Arena for a little while.
People would flip. They'd lose their minds.
Yeah, and with the feast, I've not got to try it yet. I've queued up for them. I've sat in a queue for 30 plus minutes, I think 5 or 6 times, and never gotten into a feast match.
You can get them on like Tuesday. You can get them on reset day. But other than that, the popularity for it, and I think some of it depends on your data center, but popularity's way, way down there. I used to get it a lot, like back in I guess it would have been either Shadowbringers or I can't remember when, but I remember you could get matches, but now it's just like, nope, nobody does that.
So I have crystalline. Is it crystalline or crystal now? I thought it during the last live letter that was in Japanese. He's like, we're calling it crystal now. I hope it's crystal conflict because that's a lot easier to say.
Yeah, crystalline conflict is a little wordy, but I don't know. We'll see. I don't remember.
Um, but what do you think about? Well, I'm just going to call it crystal conflict. What do you think about it? Do you think it's going to be successful? Do you think it's going to be fun?
It's hard to judge without playing it, but I will say that the size is nice because I mean you get these small groups, keep the queues down, more than likely to get into these groups. I like that there's not restrictions on roles, which makes your queues go more faster. It's just going to depend on, like you said, it's going to depend on how much agency you have to feel like you're making a difference in what's happening on the battlefield. If it feels like this big slog fest that it doesn't really matter what you do, even though there are strategies for, all the PvP modes. I'm not saying they're not, and I'm definitely not a PvP expert, so I can't speak on that like some other people can. But if I feel like I've got some agency and other people do too, I think it could be really popular. I'm gonna try it. Like I'm excited to try everything that's coming out with 6.1.
I hope that it's good because I feel like that's something. I also like battle passes. I'm a shameless Fortnite fan, so I like battle passes and giving you something to kind of earn towards. I'm a little confused. So like you get the currency because I looked at the way the battle pass or the seasonal rewards or series rewards are structured, and it's like a lot of those little 100 currency things. I assume you
Yeah,
trade that in for things later on rather than it just
yeah, it would
giving
have
you
to
an
be.
item. But a part of me wishes it would just like give you an item for every level, so you have like an incentive to kind of work your way through the chain. But I guess the flexibility is worthwhile. But
Yeah,
um,
that was the problem with Halo Infinite was it felt like you would go through so many of these level ups in the multiplayer, and you would go so many levels without getting anything. And it's like,
mm,
why am I even doing this?
yeah,
So hopefully that won't be a problem.
yeah, I know there's like the big kind of things that each of like the 5 point or 10 point nodes or whatever. Once you get there, you get like an actual item. But it's going to be interesting. I hope that it's successful. I don't know. I hope that they're not, and I don't think that they would be. I hope that they're not trying to like push it as a esport or something like that, or try to build it out faster than it naturally will. I know that there's ranked and everything there, but I hope that, coming from Blizzard games where it was all about let's create the arena world tournament, let's create, the Heroes of the Dorm and all this other stuff, Overwatch League, all these different things, and they've just pour cash into it. And then when it doesn't make up all that huge amount of cash that they poured into it, they just go, "Oh, well, it's not worth it. Let's just abandon Heroes of the Storm."
Yeah. Let
And
it grow into its own thing
yeah,
first before you decide if you want to make something bigger than that.
yeah, let it grow organically. And I think that, hopefully there's enough of a community for it, and hopefully it's good. Um,
Yeah.
I've had my ideas for a MOBA mode for a long time. I know Rival Rings is technically a MOBA. There's waves and minions and stuff, but I want a 5v5 3 lane like traditional MOBA in 14. I feel like that would be a good mode. Um, I keep saying it because I'm hoping that I could speak it into existence at some point.
Let us do it with minions and put it in the gold saucer.
That
People
would,
would play that.
yeah,
I would play that.
yeah, that would be cool because then that way you could tie minions to being. I think it should be a PvP mode, but maybe like allowing your minions to, you know, you could choose which one of your minions was the minion waves, and the minions like walk towards the thing. So you could have, I
Yeah,
don't know, an army of Yugiris and something, wind up
that
Yugiris
could
like
work.
running towards something which would be pretty terrifying. So, but I don't know. I think that's probably needed too. But the cool thing is, I look at all these different systems that they keep adding to the game, and they're uniquely independent systems too, which is always very fascinating because if Warcraft puts a system in the game, they're like, we're going to make you do it, whether you want to do it or not. It's never going to kind of exist on its own as its own thing. I think the only thing they've ever done like that is the Mage Tower.
And very rarely is there any form of adaptability. And I don't want our discussion to become a here's why Warcraft is garbage.
I know. I know.
But there's no adaptability. You know, they give feedback to these systems and say, this is why this isn't going to work. And they don't change anything until the final patch of the expansion. Whereas, you know, the development team behind 14 is for the most part willing to say, oh, well, this doesn't work, let's tweak this a little bit, or this does work, let's expand this. Like the trust system getting expanded into this whole full-blown thing, which is fantastic. You talked about this in one of your episodes about how giving players more opportunities to, you know, do things on their own and make it a more solo experience, so it breaks down that like final wall of accessibility of, I'm not playing 14, it's an MMO, I don't play MMOs. So, you know, as long as they're willing to make decisions like that, you know, I think the development of the game is going to be in good shape.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, look at things like Bozja and Eureka and Palace of the Dead, and I think they're considering putting in another deep dungeon or something like that. I've heard them talk about it at least briefly, nothing official, but you know, all these little independent systems. One of the things I'm really into, you know, talking about end games. My end game right now is Chocobo Racing. It's been that for the last 2 weeks.
I've seen your posts about it.
I'm a little addicted to it, and it gives me these like fond memories of, you know, the mini games from back in Final Fantasy VII and other. Obviously, it's better than the mini games in Final Fantasy VII if you've gone back and tried to play those more recently. But you know, like trying to get the perfect, I forget what is it, the black chocobo, I think is the fastest one in Final Fantasy VII, or at least
I think that's right.
At least it's the fastest on one of the terrain styles or something like that. But you know, it brings back memories of like Pokemon and Monster Rancher and some of these games that I used to play.
Monster Rancher, that is a franchise I have not thought about in a long time.
You know, they just re-released it. It's on Steam now. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
So for those of you who don't know, Monster Rancher, speaking, because, you know, we're talking about Chocobo Racing, so I'm going to make a loose connection here. Monster Rancher was this weird game on PS1. It was like Pokemon, and the way that you would get a new monster is you would open up your PlayStation, pull out the disc, and put in whatever disc or CD that you have. It could be a music CD, it could be another PlayStation game, it could be anything, and you just put it in there, and the disc supposedly generated a new monster for you to raise, and it was the weirdest thing.
It was very unique. Unique. It had an anime. It had a show.
Did it really?
It did. There was an anime. It got dubbed. I remember it aired on Fox Kids.
But anyway, I mean, the chocobo breeding thing isn't quite as in-depth as, say, Monster Rancher is. But, you know, the fact that you raise this chocobo up through the ranks and it can only get so far. And I was really, like, kind of emotional. I'm like, I don't want to give up my first chocobo. And then once I got over that hurdle, I'm like, I'm on my 5th one right now. I don't care anymore. Just give me the better chocobo.
Just another cog in the machine.
But, you know, like that process of, you know, raising a chocobo up and having different stats and different abilities and different things and being able to you know, train it and modify it the way that you want to modify it is so much fun. And honestly, the races, because they're these short, you know, around 2-minute bursts, is a blast to do. It's a lot of fun to do. And I don't know. I mean, you've seen other streamers really get into it. Asmon had his chocobo racing phase where he was talking about having the like biggest, bestest inbred chocobo that there possibly could have. And Akalon's done it for a while now too, and a few others. And it's I don't know. I am mad at myself that I didn't get into this sooner, but you know, it's amazing that I can just decide, all right, I just want to play this weird mini game that's in the gold saucer, you know, as my end game right now. And there's
cool. Nothing wrong with that.
No, there's no, well, you better stop doing that and go over here and do this system.
Better do your dailies.
Yeah, better do your dailies.
Miss out on your currency.
I mean,
I have never played the chocobo racing. You might judge me. I'm
not judging. I just started 2 weeks ago. How or why would I judge you?
Hey, I don't know. You seem to be the biggest chocobo racing fanatic.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm planning on someday. I'm planning on having the biggest, bestest chocobo that there possibly is.
There you go.
I will win all the races. It really doesn't give you that much MGP though. You get MGP boost for, you know, doing a certain number per week. And then for completing the challenge courses, once you get to those for the first time, you get a good, you know, like 20,000 MGP for completing those. But literally, I've just broke even the whole time. Just every MGP I earn just goes into feed for training the next Chocobo. So I, you know, I'm totally on board for that. I hope that they expand the system, because I hope that I don't hit a cap and it's just no longer interesting. Like, I hope
Oh yeah, there's nowhere you can go. Yeah, that would suck.
I hope that they kind of keep building on it. I don't know, and maybe they'll have tournaments or something like that, but I haven't delved into, I've done the tutorial for Verminion. I haven't really got, you know, fully into that yet, but
Done a little bit of it. It's kind of fun.
Hmm.
It's kind of fun. There are certain minions that are really, really good at it. It's a good little time waster. Kind of like Triple Triad. It's a good time waster.
yeah. So let's talk. So we talked about crystalline conflict. Let's talk about another thing I saw that was coming in 6.1, which I think is something that's probably of interest to people like you and Elio. The unending codex. I that was the thing that not a lot of people talk about just yet.
Yes, I was so excited for this, and I was telling a couple of my buddies, I'm like, this is the feature. This is the feature I'm so excited for, because there's no way to go and review some of that information in game. You have to go to external sources, which may or may not be accurate, because there's a lot of stuff out there on the various wikis that isn't accurate. So you kind of have to take multiple different sources and compare and try to see what you can find in game. I think it's fantastic, especially because, you know, you and I talked about how part of the Final Fantasy 14 mythos is there's just so much and there's so many connections, and hopefully this will make it easier for people to follow along, because it was kind of like that problem of in Shadowbringers before Crystal Tower was required. It's when you get to that certain part in the story and that character shows their face and you're like, the game clearly expects me to know who this is, but I don't. And I was one of those people. I had not done Crystal Tower, so I did not know. And then they came out with that patch where it's like, hey, you got to go do this before you can do anything else. So
Yeah.
hopefully this will kind of eliminate some of those storytelling problems.
Yeah. I hope so too. And I think it's, you know, it's nice to be able to have a resource in game that kind of unlocks as you do things too. And that's, I think, really nice too, because, you know, you look at other games like Warcraft, where you have all these books and stuff that are in game, right? They're all scattered throughout the world, but there's no place that it collates all that information for you. And
right, you can't just open up a compendium at any time and look at it.
But 6.1 just feels like, you know, this is the first time, because I basically quit Shadowbringers before 5.1 came out, and so I didn't like continue on with the MSQ. I wasn't doing any end game stuff. I just completed the 5.0 MSQ. But it feels like an embarrassment of riches of things, and to know that there's another patch coming down the line in 4 months is insane, because
Yeah.
you know, we're getting what, the new 24-man alliance raid, the new extreme, or is it ultimate?
We're getting a new extreme, we're getting a new dungeon, we're getting a new ultimate,
new storyline quests.
Yeah, the changes to how a lot of the MSQ stuff from A Realm Reborn is going to function, the revamped the companion system, the way it's coming at me. There's a lot in 6.1. I'm surprised the amount of stuff we're getting.
More Hildebrand, data center travel, Ishgardian housing. I mean, it's it's like, holy cow, this is a lot of stuff.
Yeah. It's they deliver. That's another, we've talked about Warcraft so much. That's another thing. How many barren patches have there been in Warcraft where it's like,
the selfie cam patch?
Yeah, this is all we're getting after X amount of months. And then now this is coming out and it's like, wow, there's so much.
I remember the first patch that I got really, and this will be the last thing I say about Warcraft, until maybe it comes up during the spoiler section. But I remember the first patch I got really mad about when it came to Warcraft. And it was, I forget what the number of the patch was, but it was the first patch after Cataclysm launched. And it was just the Zulamon raids turned into 5-man dungeons.
I remember this.
And you know, they said like, this is our patch. And I'm like, where's the raid? Where's the new zone? Where's, like, you're literally just giving us old content granted it's in a different way and you've modified some of the bosses and whatnot. Literally, this is it?
Yeah.
Are you? And they're like, but we're giving you better gear from that, so you can gear up your characters. And I'm like, but there's nothing else to do. And it's and then obviously the next patch was pretty good and everything, the Firelands patch, but I don't know, it just seems like there's so many different, unique, crazy things that there's going to be to try this time around. I've got my 50 million gil. I'm ready to go buy a mansion.
God, you're wealthy.
I hope it happens. I hope I get lucky. Because if it does, I've got a whole nother end game opening up to me, because I'm going to design the Popoto pub in game, and it's going to be the craziest. Like, I'm gonna have DJs there. It's gonna be a blast.
The things that people can do with the housing and furniture, the remodeling system in game, consistently blows my mind. The things I see on Twitter, and it's like, this is somebody's house in game. That is crazy, because I'm terrible at it. And yet you've got people who are able to do these glitches to make upper risen platforms and, compressed ceilings. And I don't know. It's crazy. It's cool. I love that it's there for people. But yeah, the housing thing, that's such a crapshoot. Like, our FC is really lucky that we were able to get one day, and it was just because we were taking shifts to camp it. Yeah. So that when it came up, we could buy it.
I'm lucky that I joined an FC that had one, and so I get to see the glory that a FC house is. But I want my own so that I can kind of do my own thing with it. And and I'm fingers crossed. Fingers crossed that there's not enough people that have 50 million gil to just drop on a mansion in game. But there's only I
don't think 6. The average Joe has that much. So I feel like you have an advantage. I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed for you.
That was my hope too, right? Because 20 million, there's a little bit of a weed off. Everyone's gonna be fighting over the 5 million gil houses. So because everyone can raise 5 million gil pretty easy. But I'm just really, really hoping that it happens. But there's only 6 per housing district. So 6 times 24 is what?
It's very limited.
144 of those spots, something like that. Yeah. So there's only so many of those to go around, and I'm hoping I can get one on Midgard Zormer. So why don't we switch gears and talk spoilers, so we can talk about the stuff that your channel's all about, the stuff that I absolutely love, which is the story and lore of this game. So this is your spoiler warning for if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We're going to talk full end game spoilers, speculate about the future. This is coming out a couple days before 6.1, so if you know all this stuff, we're probably going to get a lot of things wrong. but
that is okay.
But that's part of the fun. You could come back and listen and see how wrong we were. So first thing I kind of want to start off with, because it's a question that I've had for quite a while. Who are the 12?
It's a very good question. I think my prediction, and we already said it's okay to get things wrong. I'm hoping that the 12 are going to be some kind of heroes of old, some kind of legendary figure, because I think people forget how much time has spanned over the course of the story. We're talking tens of, well, I don't want to say 10. I remember the number 12,000 years sticking out between the Sundering and the various, to get to the modern time period. And that doesn't account for how long the ancients were there and whatever preceded them. So a lot of time has passed. It's kind of hard to say what specifically they're going to be. I love the visuals. I love the art style. I love how all the things that we've seen from the trailer make this raid seem very grandiose in terms of scale, in a similar way to the Evilus raids from back in the day, which are some of the best raid content that the game has ever gotten. So that is a tough question to answer. One thing that I will speak on, and I'm super familiar with it because I did this video just last week about Azam. I don't think that Azamiya has a connection to Azam. And the reason I don't think that's true is because Urianger hypothesized it, and I feel like he's going to be wrong. I don't feel like he would hypothesize, which even he says he's probably wrong. But there's got to be some legend that they are following. So how did like this legend get created? I don't know. I'm
It's
excited
like,
to find
would
out.
that work out? So Ardbert's part of is one of the reflections of Asm, and so that's there's 14, right? There's the void.
There's
The
14.
void one got. I don't know if we know what happened to the void world Asm. That's kind of just, is he gone, or he or she
So the
gone now?
void world it's not totally lost. They are trying to, and I forget the specific character, but I remember reading about this for what video was it? It was probably the Asian video, that there are people looking into ways to possibly restore it. So, and remember, it was not fit for rejoining. So probably what happened, I mean, that shard of Asm could still be out there. I think the actual number of shards that have been rejoined with the Warrior of Light is 8. I think it's 8 out of 14. So there's still some out there that we don't know about. The issue is, even though they're out there, how do they possibly transcend dimensions? Because it's very unlikely that we're going to encounter another Asm shard on the source. Although I
Right.
do think it's possible, and
They
it
brought
may have
Ardbert
already
over.
happened. They did. So it is and people figure out, dimensional travel becomes more figured out as we go on, and there are still Asians floating around out there, so who knows what's going to happen. So it is possible, but I don't think that Asm is like I don't think is a shard of Asm.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody who, in terms of their actions carried on the legacy of this person, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, I never heard that take before, and I guess I completely missed over Oriange's hypothesis about this. But it's interesting. I don't think that was the case. My theory has been one of two things, and you could tell me how wrong I am on this. Given that it's supposed to be, at least according, I think what Yoshi P had said, is like it's kind of like tying up it's like an epilogue to the Heidelin and Zodiac stuff. So it's somehow related to that. To me, that says one of two things: Asians or primals. And in thinking on the Asians front, are they just unsundered Asian or sundered Asians? I don't know. I don't know if that makes a ton of sense. We've obviously seen some imagery of Asians or maybe it's not even Asians, in the 6.1 trailer, but maybe it's the Void sent people.
I think that might be connected to the role quest, I think is what I saw somebody hypothesize, and that may not be tied. Even though they were like next to each other in the trailer, it may be separate because we also saw all the alliance leaders there in that same instance beforehand. But it is possible, especially because there are, and this may have already happened, it's not confirmed, but because there are 14 shards of every single person, I think it was Emmett Selk who even said, or maybe it was Elidibus, I don't remember, but somebody threw out the idea of, if one of the sundered Asians dies, we'll just go get another one and awaken them. I think in the instance of Emerololith, which was the one who went up against Galuf Baldessian, that because there's a discrepancy in when one appears in a cutscene when Emerololith should be dead, it's a question of, was Galuf incorrect, or did he lie, or did they literally go get another shard and say, okay, we'll get our next Emerololith and we'll just keep doing this. So it is possible.
My fear with, if they continue on the Asian route is, yes, there are plenty of Asians out there. They're the sundered ones are, I think, especially, fallible in a way, right? Because they might be broken in a way like Fandaniel is broken, and influenced by the world. Some might turn out good to be good people. Some might turn out to be really bad and broken people. But I feel like we've tied a bow on that at this point in terms of like Asians. We understand them now. What else could we do with sundered Asians that is unique and interesting? So I feel like they should kind of put that to bed, even though we know that there are other Ascians floating out there. Maybe there's a rogue Ascian here or there that does some stuff, but I don't feel like that they should be a primary threat anymore the more that I've thought about it.
I don't think they can be either, because they would have to be operating on their own thing. Elidibus tells us that all the other Ascians would know that Zodiark is gone, because Zodiark is, and Yoshida confirmed, Hydaelyn and Zodiark, there's nothing left of their ether, they are gone. And that Elidibus, just as he sensed the connection, through Zodiark, that it's gone, everyone else would too. So now it's all these Ascians who were tasked with, we're going to bring this big guy back, and he's going to bring all the ancients back. Well, even if the rejoining happens, Zodiark is not coming back. So what are we even doing? And that leaves the opportunity for some Ascians to pursue their own agendas, and they do wield considerable power when put up against the average adventurer. We're obviously not the average adventurer. So I think it could happen, but I think they need to put it to bed for a little while. I think things need to stay on a mostly smaller scale in terms of the world building, and just kind of put the Ascians to bed for a little bit. And maybe some point down the line, an Ascian could pop up and be involved in something. Maybe an Ascian could even become good.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Zodiark, I think I saw it when I was watching one of your videos. So I guess I never really fully conceptualized that. Is the Zodiark, that merged with Van Daniel, is that Zodiark really just one of multiple reflections of Zodiark? Are there
Correct.
Are there
Yes.
12 other Zodiarks out there, or 12 other Hydaelyns out there too?
I don't know if that's the case of Hydaelyn, because it's never really said. Now that's actually a good question, because Hydaelyn caused the summoning. Was she sundered? That's a really good question. But in the case of Zodiark, we know he was sundered. That was the main
point.
Well, that was like the 1-2 punch, which was the first one was ancients are too dense in ether. There's no way they'll ever be able to control Dynamis. Song of Oblivion will eat them up eventually. So we've got to sunder everybody else. Then we got to sunder Zodiark, because he'll just bring the ancients back and restart everything and put civilization on a crash course to nothingness. So yes, there were various sundered forms of Zodiark on all these different moons in the different shards.
That's interesting.
Which they're not there anymore. They're all dead now, but
all the Zodiark, or all the Zodiarks?
All the Zodiarks are gone.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, Zodiark is there's nothing left of his ether, is I think is the way Yoshida worded it. Like, he's totally gone, and Elidibus hinted at it too. And then just like Hydaelyn, she gave up everything she had in that final battle with us. She's gone too. But I don't think she was. That's a really good question of whether or not she was sundered. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. So my other theory on the 12 is that they're primals in a way, in a way that's kind of similar to how Elidibus transforms into the warrior of light, and these 12 are, maybe they're Ascians or ancients, maybe they're just individual heroes like you suggested, who have ascended, to a primal form because people have believed in them. And that, I think, would tie in very nicely with this whole Newfound Adventure idea of, well, the warrior of light is just going back to being a humble adventurer now. And here you have all these people, because of all this faith that people have poured into them, have transcended into these primal beings, and maybe have lost a piece of themselves in that process, kind of like how Elidibus, forgets and is losing himself, as he transforms and gets further and further away from his original purpose. Maybe these are people that we're, I don't know, putting down to rescue them in a way,
And they have been they've been involved, at least in a small amount, because in those final moments of 1.0, when the Scions when everybody in the world was praying to the 12 to be saved, they stepped in and imbued Loiswa with that power to, challenge Bahamut in the way that he did. That's super spoilery for people who haven't done those parts of the raids from A Realm Reborn. But, so they have been involved in a very intangible way. So I guess another question is, why are we fighting them? And it might not be a case where we have to roll up and put them down. This could be this could be a
Tournament
test
arc.
from the 12. It could be. I don't know.
Yeah. And so primals, and I apologize for not being the deepest of lore. I'm still very much learning so much about this world. The primals themselves, have they spawned from, so they're generated through belief, like through intense, it's not aether, but it's just like belief kind of creates a primal.
So I'm not. I don't want to tell you wrong because we all kind of operate on this idea of what a primal is.
Right.
So I'm gonna
Because like
I'm gonna be
Thornton,
smart.
Thornton
Yeah,
is like one of those weird primals, right? Where you have Titan and you have Garuda, who are these very elemental beings, which Ramu is the element of lightning and all these other things, and then you have these primals that feel like very different, like King Thornton, who is quite literally a primal of an ancient god king of the Elicent, or of the Ishgardians, like.
yeah.
And then you have Anima, who is literally a primal that is created because the people of Garlemald have no religion and their government is their religion, so their emperor is in essence their primal. So it kind of makes sense that these would be people who are primals, but yeah.
So the primal connection would make sense because the important thing about primals is, it's based on the will of the people who summon them, and there's a lot of concentrated ether involved, but they always take the forms of legendary figures or mythical creatures. So there's got to be some sort of inspiration from legend to inspire whatever it is that they are creating. And there is some agency in that too, in terms of the summoner. So there could be they very well could be primals who have ascended and are now operating on this semi-godhood type status. Um, but I think there is something to be said with, this idea of legendary figures of legend, from ages past, stories that have been passed down, just like a game of telephone. Things are remembered a little bit differently between each generation. Um, so
I feel like that
I
would
think
be,
that could definitely fall into it.
if we're not putting them down, which it's just a tournament arc type of thing. Maybe I'm just theorizing and spitballing here. What if our Warrior of Light, the reason that we're going up against the 12 is because they want to see if we're ready and able to ascend to being one of them. Like we're ready to ascend to being a primal, if they are primals or a god or whatever you want to call it. And we're not. Maybe we're choosing to fight them because we don't want to. I don't know. There's some interesting things I think story-wise you could play with there with your character in terms of kind of like their existential crisis of.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's going to be, and I'm hoping it's not a situation of God's gone rogue, we've got to kill him, because how often does that happen?
Yeah,
I would hope that it's something a little bit different from that. So I wouldn't mind the idea of, we're testing your metal. We want to see what you're worth, and maybe you can become one of us, or maybe maybe something has happened with this kind of like we're stepping away from the Hydaelyn and Zodiac arc and we're moving on to something entirely different. And maybe the 12 too have to move on, or maybe they're dying or fading away. And maybe, I don't know, maybe they need our help of some kind. We'll just
Yeah,
have
I
to
mean
see.
that could be part of it too, is they're trying to see who is their worthy successor, and while they're fading away because they feel like there needs to be a successor, and I feel like that would be an interesting. I feel like that would be an interesting thing to play around with kind of like the psyche of the world, right? We have the Song of Hope now, and everything feels good, but then what if the gods that these people have worshipped for a long period of time? I mean, some of the cultures are very dedicated, like Halone.
Yeah.
Halone is very much a core part of Ishgardian culture, and what if they realize that there is no Halone or anymore, and that could put a weird, I think they played with that a little bit with, especially with Ishgard, with Thoradin and everything else. But
Yeah, they did a little bit.
but I feel like, on a macro like world level, like what happens when your gods abandon you or they're no more? What does that do to people? I think that would be an interest. That seems like the type of topic that, JRPGs like to tackle, those big, huge existential
Yeah, it's in a
questions.
similar vein to. Yeah, I don't know. I one thing I really like about it is that we don't really know much about the situation we're going into.
Mm-hmm. Are we getting a trial series? So like Sorrow of Worlet. Obviously it's not part of 6.1, but are they planning a trial series as part of the post Endwalker expansions?
I'm not sure. I would have to imagine that there will be. Just because we've had some added in every single expansion preceding this, but I don't know if they've said specifically what they plan on doing. I don't know if they've kicked the can that far down the road.
It'll be interesting what they decide to pull up with that, because to me the Sorrow of Worlet is one of the best, I think, side stories in the game. I think, and I love each one of those fights. Those fights are so much fun.
Oh yeah.
But I'm a sucker for the weapons, from like 7 and everything. So those definitely hit the nostalgic funny bone for me. But okay, so we talked about that. Let's talk about Tataru's grand endeavor. Is that the MSQ is Tataru's grand endeavor? Because it seemed like they announced it as something separate. And if it is something separate, where do you think Tataru's grand endeavor goes?
I thought okay, so it's not a main thing. It is a side quest. So it's, let me see here. I'm reading because a lot of this stuff I have since forgotten. So all it really says is that it's related to her boutique, and it's going to be. Does this relate to the way the glamour stuff is changing? Is that how they're going to frame this?
I didn't even think of a reason why they would give that a lore explanation, but it would make sense.
It very well could be. I mean, just in looking at everything that's been released about it, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like doesn't feel like it's going to be a crafter thing necessarily, or crafter or gatherer thing necessarily, but it would make sense that it would be if that's the topic.
Well, it says here that they're planning on it's going to be a series, and it's going to run from 6.1 to 6.5.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not. Maybe it is its own thing. I honestly don't know. Yeah, there's just a lot of people. Everything I can find is just people speculating on what is this going to be about.
Yeah.
Because of how ruthless of a businesswoman that she is.
Yeah. It almost in a way feels like it's another Hildebrand. And I'm only through like the second chunk of the Hildebrand series, so I'm not that far into that. I'm past the part with the vase, and that's it. So I'm very
Hildebrand is gold. I don't want to spoil much for anybody who hasn't done Hildebrand, but you need to get caught up because there's more coming in 6.1, and the rewards are worth it themselves because you get emotes,
the dance,
you get minions, and some of the minions are really good in the gold saucer, some of the best actually. Because that's the original reason I did it, was when I was going to do that game mode. They're like, you should get this minion. Like, okay, I'll do Hildebrand. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually hilarious.
Yeah,
so
I need to get caught up on that. I keep saving it for stream because I want to do it on stream because I want to capture my reactions to it because I've got through the whole MSQ and I've not captured any of my reactions, and just even if it no one enjoys it, even if it's just for me, like I want to have those moments preserved, because I tell you what, in the first bit when the bombs came out, I was like, what is happening?
It's like you're watching a movie that somebody made in Gmod, and like with the facial expressions and the way the bodies contort and the camera work, it's very much its own thing. No other quest does that stuff.
But
yeah, exactly. It's really good stuff.
No, I mean, from the little bit that I've done so far, and you've got until like 6.1.5 to get caught up on that. So there's a little bit of time, if you want to be ready for that, ready to go. But I hope, there's part of me that hopes like Tataru's grand endeavor is kind of like another Hildebrand. It's this whole side thing where it's like Tataru's got her business and she's trying to run it, and she's just, like you said, ruthless and snarky the whole time. And you just got it. You're almost like her, I don't know, her, not bound, like her repo man, so to speak.
Yeah, you're kind of like her Gal Friday.
Yeah, you got to go around and just beat people up and take things from them or whatnot. Or, and it would just, there's so many comedic possibilities, I think, from that. From, Tataru walking up and, let's just say, I don't know, like a giant burly row leather daddy gets scared to death of Tataru. Like, there's so many, I think, little like humorous things that you could do with that. That, I hope that they kind of go a comedic route with it. I hope it's not too deadpan and serious. I don't know.
I think they will. I mean, people do underestimate though how important Tataru is to the overall story progression. Like this saving the world as many times as happened would not have happened if she was not in the background doing her job.
Right. Well, it's kind of, the thing with, I love Tataru. The thing, she's a potato too, so like, kind of, fits in with my theme of just loving all things Lalafell. But the thing I find fascinating about Tataru is she is so easily, I mean, from going from ARR, she could have so easily been like this forgettable secretary antiquated trope, of like, why do the Ghostbusters have Janine? And then Janine's great, if the Ghostbusters, like Janine's great. Like, she's she's got a personality on her own, but she's like their secretary, right? She just answers the phone and gives people sass when they need it. She doesn't really have any character arc or development or anything like that. And I feel like Tataru, they've it's going to sound weird. I feel like they've given dignity back to that person behind the scenes that, helps everything, run smoothly and get done, because quite frankly, the world wouldn't run without people who are there to, help out and make sure things run smoothly. It's unfortunate that they don't get as much praise as they should and everything else, and they don't get the limelight, but then there are people that don't want the limelight either. But, she's one of those characters, I think, that's just, I don't want to say like she's like an inspiration and a role model, but the way that they treat her is they're like, here's the serious adult in the room who's taking care of all the crap, while all the kids go off and swing their swords and stuff at things. And
she's been handled very well. Very well. And initially when I first encountered that character, I'm like, this is going to be that trope. That character, you're like, oh, when I asked me to go do stuff, I don't want to do it, but she's invaluable. And I think a lot of people underestimate everything that she's done. So it's like, I don't remember where I heard it, but it was like talking about like the field of culinary. Like, behind every chef, you're going to find 2 or 3 great sous chefs behind that person. So there's and people spinning the wheels and making it work.
Behind them, farmers and people who are growing their produce, and butchers and other people. So Tataru's kind of like the embodiment of the working person.
For sure.
And that's what I think is so amazing about her. And I love that moment where obviously everyone talks about the moment where, she gives Alfie crap for spending all the money on the katana. But the moment I don't think gets talked about enough is the one where, everyone shows up and chips in everything at the last minute. And Alfie's like, well, who paid for all of this stuff? And then it kind of gets revealed that the Scions paid for it all. He's like, what? And she says, frugality is key, because, every once in a while you need to spend big. And it's just like, that's such a good lesson for people, because,
absolutely,
save up for a rainy day, save up for if it's the end of the world, that's why we built up this coffer in the first place. It's not just to amass wealth, it's to amass wealth with a purpose. And that's, that's an important lesson, I think, for people to learn. But yeah, so Tataru's awesome. And anything with more Tataru, I just hope that they don't go the route where she's like the secret big, scary or big bad that everyone was afraid of. All the Asians were actually afraid of Tataru.
Yeah, probably not. I'll have faith that they won't do that.
So where does I had this discussion with V, and for me, I thought the story was done. She wants to see Meteon back in the story. Where do you stand on Meteon? Does Meteon continue to have a role to play, or is she just out there? Like, this is the way I would want to see it, is like she's just kind of out there singing the song of hope, regaining her hope in humanity and the races of the world and everything, the races of the universe.
The big thing about Meteon is that she didn't really get to have this experience of seeing what's out there in the world and really understanding the people that her and her sisters were ultimately casting judgment on. Now, her sisters got to, and granted, they had a very flawed experience in the way Hermes shaped up his very flawed mission, and there's a lot of problems there. But Meteon was this person who was having a different experience being shaped by, for the most part, Hermes, but eventually us and the other ancients that were there during that time in Elpis. So, when she finally, when she makes this stand and is like, I'm going to choose to believe in humanity, you have to fight despair, regardless of how bad things seem to get, you have to push forward. I think her role now is, I think she has a life to live. I think she has to go out and experience, these other peoples that she has never really had an opportunity to do. She just has all this data that was compiled by the other media out there in, this, not the ethereal sea, the sea of stars. So I think that I think her role now is just going to be going out and observing peoples, and she may pop up at some point, but I don't know that, kind of in that same vein of things are going to get smaller. I'm hoping things will get smaller for a little bit. I think she can go off and do her own thing and just kind of watch, and she can observe us too. But I don't think it's right for her to have direct impacts on the story. I think the thing she missed out on was getting to experience all of these things that we believe in, and we had to convince her and her sisters of, through our will, asserting our will on them. I think she's just got to go out and live life.
Yeah. I just don't see where we could take her and not have it, I don't want to say cheapen the moment. I mean, yeah, she could go the like alpha route where she's just kind of out in the world and meeting people and saying hello and enjoying life and experiencing different things, and you kind of just see her there like that. I think would be a nice way to handle it. But I don't know. I just feel like her story is at a conclusion. It's not at a conclusion, but it's conclusion.
She's had her arc.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure they could come up with something meaningful to do with her, but there's other interesting threads to pull on for the time being. I don't think we have to revisit her, at least not anytime soon.
So you said you're going to die on the Zenos hill. So I'm not in the camp of Zenos is a bad villain. I don't think he's a bad villain at all. I think he's just a different villain from Emet-Selch and from the other Asians, right? He's 100% more complex than La Habrea, at least as La Habrea has been currently presented to us.
Yeah, and it's hard to judge that stuff from earlier Realm Reborn on its own, because they have said we didn't know what we were doing, and then we decided, hey, let's do something different. So La Habrea is, and we may get some more development on La Habrea from the Pandemonium stuff.
Yeah, we definitely
as we've kind of gotten on what we were guessing is Elidibus. But yes, Zenos is not this incredibly complex character like Emet-Selch, and Emet-Selch is probably one of the, I don't say probably, I will say he is. Emet-Selch is one of the best Final Fantasy villains that's ever been written out of the entire franchise. And just in his nuance and his depth and his motivation and being able to understand him is what is part of what made Shadowbringers so good. Zenos is not like that. When he debuted in Stormblood, he was just this big, strong obstacle that was strong because we had to be up against somebody that was strong, and he just wanted to fight strong people, and he kind of fulfilled a bunch of really one-dimensional anime tropes that not everybody was a fan of, and then he died, and then he came back, and it's like, well, if they're bringing him back, they better bring him back for a good reason. But Xenos doesn't have to be super in depth to fulfill the role in the story that he does. And he does go through change. He does go through change. And I think people are just really dismissive of the change that he goes through. They're like, oh no, he's a nuisance. I'm so over him. We've already beaten him once. Why does he keep popping up? He's kind of like that recurring villain in a Saturday morning cartoon where he just keeps popping up, and we've swatted this fly once before, go away. There's bigger things to worry about. But I think people just are really dismissive of some of the things that about Xenos that with the complete picture are well written. I don't think he was well written in Stormblood. Some people disagree with me on that. I don't think he was well written then.
No, I agree. I think Stormblood Xenos is my best analogy or comparison to it would be Stormblood Xenos is a New Hope Darth Vader. Comes in, does some cool, powerful things, gets knocked away on a spaceship. Like he's kind of threatening. He has those threatening moments. But if you look at Darth Vader in A New Hope, he really doesn't do a whole lot. He's just there and has a presence, and that's what Xenos I think is. Darth Vader doesn't give it his depth until Empire, and I don't think that they've gone they've developed Xenos in a way that like Darth Vader's developed in Empire and Return of the Jedi. But I think that for Xenos, I think that they did a really good job at that. And I was one of those people that because of all the marketing and everything else, I should know better at this point with this team. I thought Xenos was going to be the end boss, just like probably a lot of other people did. Xenos and Zodiark merging in some way was going to be the end boss of Endwalker. And I'm glad that they didn't go that route, because it would have been literally just kind of a rehash of the Shinryu thing in a way. I think my problem with Xenos' usage in Endwalker and things I think that they could have done a little bit better is that he kind of just enters the story and then leaves for a while, and then enters it again and then gets shut down by Alizé, which is one of my favorite moments with him. And because like you said, he goes through change. That's the moment that changes him. Alizé yelling at him.
That was the catalyst for his change. I mean, she got through to him, and part of the reason that he kept dipping out of the story is because he realized that, he made the realization early on that unless this final days situation is put to rest, like initially he was like, you know what, I'll use this final days thing as a tool. I don't give a crap about this Van Daniel guy, but he's a means to an end. And if I create enough problems, then I become the problem that the Warrior of Light has to stop. My friend will pay attention to me. And then he became disassociated from this problem because of Van Daniel's true plan. And so he's like, okay, I realize you are not going to give me what I want because your focus is not on me. So I'm going to be patient and I'm going to wait. I won't cause any more problems. You come to me when your time is ready. And he would occasionally pop up where he'd be like, I'm still waiting for you, until Alizé was like, if you're so invested in this person you think is your friend, then why don't you give a crap enough to help your friend out with his problems? Invest in him as a person. That is why no one will give you the time of day. That's why you have no friends. And that's why you hate life. And he's like, she might be right. And so he's like, okay, well, I'll go help the warrior clean up this mess. And that's the change he goes through. He realizes he has to invest in people in order to, get them the time of day so he can showcase. And because of his upbringing, the only way he knows how to express himself is in a fight. He tells us this. He tells us this multiple times, that he doesn't understand normal people. He doesn't understand their problems, but in a way, in that final moment before he passes, he expresses that he wishes that he could. I think he looks at the way the warrior approaches things and he's like, if this was fulfilling for you, should I have done this too? I think he dies with probably some regrets. I don't think he died with all pages to his book closed. I think he had that question of, did I make the right choices?
Yeah. And you theorize, I can't believe I missed this in the game. If it was spelled out explicitly, maybe I was just, too emotional while it was going through. But you believe or I guess Urianger believes that, maybe Zenos is the one that wished that, I forget what it's called, not lodestone, but
the teleporter.
Yeah.
So Urianger theorized this it's an optional conversation in the Rising Stones in the epilogue. It's after the required conversation. And I would have missed it had somebody not pointed it out to me. And we'll be able to go back when New Game Plus comes out. We can go back and revisit. I'm hoping it's in New Game Plus. But he theorizes, he's just like, it's possible that Zenos willed that teleporter to you. Now, Yoshida also said, oh yeah, well, it's also possible that the warrior did it himself. And it is. But I think in that moment, and I think it's okay to be up to interpretation, but I don't think that Zenos having that change and finally having that confrontation, I don't think he would have wished for the Warrior of Light to be stuck there. I think he would have wanted his friend to be like, you know what? We had our moment. We expressed ourselves. We gave it everything we've got. You obviously have a purpose to keep on going. Don't stay here like me. Go do your thing. Go be the hero again.
Yeah. It's yeah, because he didn't want, yes, he wanted to have a glorious moment, and if the Warrior of Light died, he died, but he died in that moment. I don't think that he wanted the Warrior of Light to die a meaningless death, so to speak.
No way.
Or a death that didn't have some triumphant battle moment, even though it kind of was like you punch each other to death and then you both lie there and die. But, technically the Warrior of Light wouldn't have died there because his or her wounds weren't fatal. Because clearly once they get back on the ship, it's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe there's healing magic involved there, but, Zenos's wounds were more fatal than the Warrior of Light's. So I don't know. It's interesting because I can see a part of like someone like Zenos who just wants a glorious combat moment that says like we killed each other in our final moments and that's the way that it ends. That would be I think I could see him feeling like that satisfying too. But like you said, he's gone through some level of change. Maybe not a ton, but just that 5%.
Yeah. It's not a big change by any means. It's big in the context of his character, but in terms of like Emmett Selk, it's not a big change. Emmett Selk decided you are worthy.
Right.
I'm not happy about it, but carry on this legacy. Don't squander the legacy I leave you. Zenos' change was very small. Zenos' change is like, okay, fine. I'll get involved, even though this is very boring to me. And I don't think we're done with Zenos. I don't.
Oh, you don't even with the recent stuff that Yoshi P said that he's dead. He's dead.
Well, he is dead. He's definitely dead. I will not argue that he is alive. He is for sure dead. The avenues that he could return are numerous. So, I mean,
through Dynamis, through
a reflection
of himself.
First off, because he's a resonant. Because so he has the echo, he could do it again, and if he could find another host, it's possible. I don't think they'll go that route, but because all the backstory that goes into the Reaper lore with the Void Scent and how Yoshida has said that his Void Scent is very special, and there's a lot about that Void Scent that we don't know. There's just that. And the other line was he was like, well, we don't give characters minions unless their story's finished. Zenos doesn't have a minion. I know that's a very small, I know that's not like evidence, but
right.
I have this feeling that we're not done with him. Now I'm hoping we're done with him for a while, because bringing him back in this expansion at all, or even within the next year, would cheapen his big moment at the end. Let him stay dead for a while.
Yeah.
But the possibilities of him coming back there's a lot of different ways they could go about it. And I believe, I don't think we're done with him just yet. I think there's still more growth that he could go through. And you can't tell me that if in his final moments and he had these moments of regret and wondering, maybe I didn't live my life the right way. Should I have modeled it after my mirror? If he didn't have the opportunity to find a way back, you cannot tell me that this man does not have the resolve to once again
Yeah.
pop up and say, I find you again, my friend.
My other, I mean, technically we could see him again if we go back to the ethereal sea too, because I imagine his spirit would go there. So, I guess if they could bring back Emmett and Hythlodaeus, why couldn't we bring back Zenos? So, we got our Asm stones depleted at this point, but there could be another thing that they could bring him back as well.
I mean, he's he's for sure dead, for sure. But there are ways that he could come back to life, and I think the way they have chosen to talk about his death, they're saying things in a very specific way. That's like Yoshida's like, I'm not lying, but I'm not telling you everything.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
but maybe I'm biased because I really like Zenos.
Part of after you said that, like I was speculating about where does the post patches, where the post endwalker patches go, and that'll be our next topic. But now there's some weird part of me that says like maybe he doesn't show up in 6.1, maybe not in 6.2, maybe he shows up in 6.3. Because 6.4 and 5 will be probably set up for the next story potentially, just like they have been in the past. But maybe,
or it could be something. I mean, I have to believe that we're gonna, at least Yoshola had a line in that trailer where we're looking into methods for traveling to other shards.
Mm-hmm. Which I was shocked that we went there that quickly.
Yeah, well, she's mentioned it before because she wants to be able to find a way to get back to the first.
Yeah, she mentioned it to the Aya, right?
So if they do that, then there's no reason we can't travel these other ones. And the 13th was never rejoined. It's the world of covered in darkness. It's the void world. That's where all the void scent originate from. Mm-hmm. If we go to the 13th, is there a possibility that there is a void scent Zenos cutting a swath through whatever remains on that world, and we show up and he's like, my friend, I knew that I would run into you again at some point. There's so many possibilities.
Do you think, and so here's a question about Zenos, since we're talking about void sense and other worlds and everything. Let's just say Zenos comes back.
Sure.
Is he like Vegeta then at that point? Like a hero, but kind of a reluctant hero in a way, because he's just like, I want to find a new avenue to live my life. I want to try to feel the things that I couldn't feel before. So I'm doing these good things, but I still don't really feel attached until he has a big moment where he's like, I do care now. Is that what we're building towards?
I think we could possibly build not necessarily towards caring, but tolerance. I think he could build to a point where maybe he finds fulfillment in something. And I could see an arc where he finds a way back. And I'm not saying Zenos is going to come back and become a Scion. That will never happen. But if Zenos did come back, what would he do? He would follow the Warrior of Light around and be like, you're still doing this thing. We had our confrontation. And I wondered if there was if you found fulfillment in the way that you live your life. I'm going to find out for myself. So show me what it is you do. I'm going to be here with you, whether we want him there or not. So I could see kind of like a Vegeta style role, but maybe, I don't necessarily think that he would be going out and still doing the occasional evil thing like Vegeta does, because Zenos just does things that, that fuel whatever his agenda is. And I think if he came back, his only agenda would be whatever my friend's doing, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
He's your ride or die, whether you want him to be there or not.
Right.
I would love it. There are people who will watch this, and I eventually want to do another how can Zenos come back video, and people will hate it because he's such a divisive character, but I would love it. I would love it.
I feel like that
just give it some time.
I feel like that would be a fun way to bring him back, though, is like you said, he's just there. He's like, I'm gonna help you whether you want to or not. And you're just like, I'm much better just doing this on my own. Please leave me
Yeah.
alone. And he's like,
You
but I'm
have
gonna
this
help you. You know?
You have this imposing aura. You're making the people of this village uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is what you do. You just walk around and swing your weapon and
Yeah.
save lives. That's what I'm gonna do. I think though I would love it, but
Yeah.
I could see where people would be like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I feel like that would be very divisive too. But
Yeah.
so obviously we've got this treasure map thing going on with 6.1. Ishtola brought up the portals to other worlds. Where do you think 6.1's going? And then, where do you think we go in 7.0?
That's another really good question. 6.1, I think, is gonna boil down to be something uh something very small scale. Like I think we're gonna go explore I think the dungeon takes place in a new region, one of the ones that Emmett Selk hinted at in that final piece of dialogue. I think we're going to one of those locations. What we're going after, I don't know. Now the reason Graha's tagging along is because that was his wish when he thought he was dying. He was like, I want to go. You go on that next adventure, you're taking me with you, because he's the big Warrior of Light fanboy. And I mean, he's a hero in his own right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason for him to not go with us. So Istinian's going with you because he's got the map. I love Istinian. I'm okay with it. And your Stola comes along because some people can't get enough of her. I don't feel like she's had a meaningful character moment in a long time. But
does it look like Fortuno's going with us too?
If it is, I'm totally okay with it. I like that guy. I like that person.
I think it would be interesting if he did, because you keep seeing pictures of Fortuno with his sage weapons and everything, and like that seems like it's a very real possibility that he could be tagging along, or it's one of those expanded role quests or something.
Yeah, he did have that moment where he was glancing up like skyward there for a moment in the trailer, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. And they foreshadowed
it.
Emilians talks about how like he had his dashing adventuring days, and maybe he wants to follow in his kid's footsteps.
Yeah, and what's his purpose now? I mean, what are they doing in Charlian now that all this stuff is put to bed? I'm sure they'll find something to do. Right. But maybe I don't know. It's interesting. I wouldn't mind him, dusting off his sage blades and getting busy. Yeah. And I'm okay with it. And I will say the one character that I don't want more of, and Yoshida has hinted that we will. I don't want more Thancred. I've had enough of Thancred. He was better in Endwalker. I hated Thancred in Shadowbringers.
What? Really?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he has an arc.
Like he does have an arc, but I feel like for the most part, he just exists to just be snarky with Urianger. I don't know. And he exists because they need a tank composition for trust stuff. But I'm kind of tired of Thancred.
Well, I feel like
I know that's controversial.
Reen made Thancred a better character, because Reen gave Thancred a purpose. And I think that Thancred is better with Reen. And maybe that's, yes, he's buddy copping it right now with Urianger.
Yeah.
But I feel like, Ishtola wants to go back to the first. She wants to see her friends there again. She wants to travel to these other worlds and explore and learn new things too. I feel like, if there's a happy ending for Thancred, it's go to the first, be with my daughter again, and I'm a sucker for the first. I love the first. I want to go back.
It was just fantastic storytelling.
And I don't know what else you could do with the first, but I just like the people there a lot. And I like what they did, with our characters and the relationships that they built. And I feel like that's Thancred's, possible end game is get back to see my kid again. And that's, I think, maybe that's his driving force moving forward, but I'm not through with Thancred yet. I mean, Thancred could just hang out and do things.
I know. I'm an outlier.
He's kind of like a lot of people. He's kind of like the dumbest of all the Scions. I mean,
he's got heart, and I mean, I liked him in Endwalker. Yeah. I was like, I thought I wouldn't, but I did.
No, I'm sorry. Estinian is the dumbest of all the scions. Him and
Estinian is the dumbest, but
him and Thancred are
I like
right
him.
there with each other because Urianger is a smart dude. I think Urianger might be the next one up because he just tries to sound fancy because he's not as smart as Ishtola or Kryl or Graha or other people. He's just kind of like in that middle tier, but he has this presence that makes him seem more important than he is. But
Well, for Estinian, it was all those memes that were coming out after the expansion drop, where it was like showing him standing like at a gas pump where gas is like 5.26 a gallon, and he's like, "I can't believe the incrable deal I'm getting," and like stuff like that. So yeah, he's a dummy.
Estinian
But
doesn't
I
have
love him.
common sense. I think Thancred has common sense. But I don't know.
Well,
Thancred has less
yeah, I mean,
book smarts.
Thancred is streetwise,
Right.
so I mean,
Right.
he's been around.
Right. So where do we go? Obviously it's probably all going to tie together in terms of like where 6.5 goes and then perhaps like where 7.0 goes. But if you were a bet man, like where would you say that we're going in 7.0?
In 7.0, I think we're taking charge of another one of the many regions of the map that haven't been explored, or I think we're jumping to a shard. If they're making the point to say we're looking into ways to travel to other
In
shards,
6.1.
it's not going to be this. Yeah, it's not going to be this. Well, we're going to figure it out in a while. No, we're probably going to figure it out pretty quick. So I could easily see us going to another shard just to assess what's going on, or possibly, I don't think we'll go to the 13th first because it's already, I mean, maybe we will because it's in such rough shape, and maybe like, we got to keep heroing. But I think we're going to another shard to solve something.
Yeah.
Or maybe in search of something. I don't know. That's the thing. So many of these threads that have been pulled on, a lot of them are, you know, the way they've worded it, they're kind of putting a lot of these things to bed, so it's hard to say. But I think we will have to eventually start hopping to other shards. But there is a lot of the map to explore, and I would like for us to do that in the remainder of Endwalker. So maybe like we explore new chunks of the map in Endwalker, and then in 7.0 we jump to another shard.
Yeah, because we have Mericidia, which I think Mericidia could be its own expansion, is my feeling.
It could be. It's big enough. It could be.
We have the something about the waters of old blind frost, something like that. Near Othard, I think is one of the things that Emmett Selk mentions. So do we have 5 things that Emmett Selk mentions? Is that the appropriate number?
There were more than 5. I'm trying to find
the identities of the 12 was one.
The identities of the 12 was one. See, I gotta go find it because I feel like it was a long list, and I know I saw a Reddit post that was okay. Here we go. I think this is what I want, maybe. So the things that he mentioned were the ruins beneath the bounty, which is where I think we're going.
I think
in
that's
6.
where we're going,
just based on the imagery. The Blind Frost, the New World, South Sea Isles, Mericidia, and its present state of affairs. So I think the way that was worded, that could easily be an expansion. And then the true identities of the 12 were the ones that were mentioned.
Yeah. So, sorry, I've got it pulled up on my phone right here. Let's see. Did we miss any other ones? Ruins Beneath the Bounty, Mericidia, the 12. Treasure Islands of the Frozen Waters in Blind Frost. Fable Golden Cities of the New World. The sacred sites of the forgotten people of the South Sea Isles, which I think you said that's where we're probably going.
Yeah.
All of which is to say, go expand your horizon. So that's very conveniently, that is, removing the 12 because that's its own thing. That's 4 things, before, or 5 things, I guess, before you set up the next expansion. So. Yeah. So that, and I don't know that
we'll do all those things. I don't think we'll do all of them. But some of them can definitely stand on their own as full-on expansions. But I think we have to do at least, we've got to check 1 or 2 off the list in the remainder of Endwalker.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you think, this last lore question, what do you think the next big threat is? Something that we've kind of already experienced, like the Void Scent in the Void world? Or do you think that it's something we just don't even know about yet?
it's hard to say because how do you get worse than a wave of dynamis that completely rots your ether away to the point where there's no reincarnation, your soul is
Right.
gone. That was pretty terrible. So how do you find something that's worse? And that's hard to say because, and also, how do you find a force that is capable of challenging you in the way that Medion and Fandaniel and the Ashians were able to challenge you?
Well, you don't have
S-
Asm's crystal anymore, right? So there's that part that kind of maybe weakens you a little bit.
it does weaken you, but you're still like,
I
I
know.
mean, you're the icon slayer. I mean,
Mhm.
you have a reputation for kicking around the baddest dudes and dudettes in the entire universe. Um, but I still think that they can find a way to make it interesting, and maybe scale it down to, you know, in the spirit of us taking up this role of the new Asm, you know, we're the bearer of his crystal. Um, Maybe it's we need to go help civilizations in need. So maybe it's not necessarily a threat to us, but it's these people we encounter that need our help from some, you know, threat similar to like the Garlean Empire, and we just have to step in and do what we do.
Gotcha. Well, last question overall. If you had to ask Yoshi P for any feature in Final Fantasy 14, you know, any new feature, could be anything. A new PvP mode could be, well, you're getting the unending codex, so you're getting that. I'm sure that was something you're probably wanting in game.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
What additional feature would you like to see added to 14?
This is such a boring answer. But I know what I want.
Yeah, well,
I want glamours to function like transmog does in Warcraft, where you don't have to keep the item in a chest. If you have the appearance, you just have it. And then you can just go color it. And I know that there's coding left behind where there's a reason they can't put a glamour chest in an FC house because if it's deleted, it'll crash the entire server and all this other stuff. But I don't know. I love having clothes. So a way to make that easier, like if I had like a number one feature, like that's what I want. I mean, that's it.
just to play devil's advocate, because I feel that way too. You know, I the transmog system in WoW, just get the item, it's in that, you know, you can transmog to it whenever you want. And, you know, adding the dies on top of that is yes, there's a part of me too that wants that. Given Yoshi P's answer about, you know, not obviously like GPO's time stops everything, but you cannot manipulate time. And he said, no, you're not allowed to manipulate time because we want you to have those inspirational moments of, you know, you're out in the world and the light just hits you the right way and you just feel like you have to take a picture.
Right.
Do you feel like adding like this transmog system of just you get the item, it's in your glamour chest forever? Do you feel like that potentially cheapens the experience of like getting a good piece, because then, you know, everybody could theoretically have everything at all times? Do you feel like that would kind of remove some of the creativity? Yes, it would be less cumbersome, but do you feel like there's value in the important choices of like what you stick in that glamour dresser?
I don't think so because the way I look at it is if it's a piece that I can easily get from a vendor, I'm not going to put it in the glamour chest unless I know I'm going to use it. So I throw like blue pieces in there, the one-offs that are more difficult to get, green armors from dungeons that can't be dyed but do look really cool, can fit with a certain look. But like if you're one of those people who's like an altaholic and you love leveling different jobs and you've got specific looks for each one, but you know, you don't just want to be married to one. I just feel like it makes your life easier. And I don't think it cheapens the experience because once you have that item and it's bound to you and you have it in your glamour chest, it's not like you can pop it out and go put it back on the market board or something.
Right.
So I still think it would keep that element of, you know, you want to go pursue a piece that you want. you know, the end game of glamour is not for everybody.
It's not for the faint
so
at heart.
So it's not.
Inventory management end game is the true end boss.
Yeah, people are listening to this like, this guy has terrible ideas. I hope Square never listens to him. But something else that would be cool would be something kind of similar to, I don't want Mythic Plus ripped, but I like the idea of maybe scaling difficulty for certain dungeons to compete for possibly increased rewards, or maybe a rating system. I think could be done if it was applied in a different way, to kind of make, because like once you get down for certain dungeons, like for Duty Roulette, they're autopilot 100%. Like you queue into an expert or you queue into any other high-end dungeon, I mean, everybody knows what to do for the most part. It's autopilot, but in a way that can make things challenging and maybe a little bit different. That could be fun.
You know, it makes me think not Mythic Plus, but maybe challenge modes from Mists of Pandaria. I don't know if you remember those, but like,
I do remember those. Yeah.
Like just a timed run that's just for a glamour item, you know, or a unique glamour.
I would do
that.
that.
Like that, right? Like
not everybody would do it, but I would.
No, not everybody would do it. Or if it's not the right glamour that you don't want, then you wouldn't do it. But I feel like that would be the way to do it. I 100% wouldn't tie it to player power, because then it's going to feel like, well, I kind of have to do this to raid maybe. And that's when you start integrating those systems like that, that's when I think you run into problems.
Right. It shouldn't be like, it shouldn't be tied to, you have to do this in order to be competitive. To, you know, like it shouldn't be tied to your eye level or anything like that. It should be, there should be meaningful reward. There should be reward for the challenge, but don't tie it to, I have to do this in order to do progressive content. Yeah. Make it a separate thing.
And at the bare minimum, I was playing devil's advocate. I want the transmog thing too, but you know, at the bare minimum, can we please at least get the job gear? Because I have all 20 if you count Blue Mage, but I've got all 19 combat jobs capped. Can we at least put the job gear in there? The level 50 job gear goes in the armoire.
Yeah, that goes in, but you can't do the 60 or 70.
Right.
It drives me crazy.
Can we just put the other job gear in there? Because you get it for free. You know, like just let us put it in the armoire.
No, yes. I agree 100%.
That's a
make my life easier.
That's a bare minimum thing. Because that way, you know, like you're getting that stuff just by going to a vendor and clicking on it. Maybe not the 60 and maybe not the 70 stuff, but the 80 stuff, you just go to not Amarat.
Yeah.
But you go, you know, down in the sea there. You get the guy, you talk to the guy, he's like, here's all your crap. And then same thing in Charlian. So I like some of that gear a lot, and I wish I had the flexibility to put it in there. I feel like that's an easy one because you already have a precedent for it. So yeah, please make that happen. But thanks so much for being here on this episode of the Popoto Pub Stout Helm. Please let you plug all your social medias and channels and everything, but please give them a follow at all these places.
Hey, I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for the invitation. I've really enjoyed it. You can find me on YouTube. It's just Stout Helm. I put out a new video. I try to once a week, usually on Friday or Saturday. Just depends on how the week has been going. You can follow me on Twitter on Stout Helm. I would plug my Twitch, but I don't stream that much. So YouTube and Twitter are definitely a place to find me.
Yeah, and thank you for all the wonderful videos that you've made so far for Final Fantasy XIV, because I've definitely learned a lot from watching them, and I enjoy the kind of more, you know, philosophical almost take on some of these characters. It's really enlightening to listen to. So it's been a great conversation. But yeah,
thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
And thank you everyone at home for listening to the 9th episode of the Popoto Pub Final Fantasy XIV podcast. You can find me on YouTube under Popo Jagaimo. You can find me on Twitch as well. I'm going to be streaming some different things over there. I've gotten really into Vampire Survivors lately. That game is the best $3 I've ever spent in my life. And, you know, highly recommended for everybody, but stream some different things over there too, you know, do some music stuff, do, Vampire Survivors. I was playing Tiny Tina's Wonderlands over there as well. But I plan on streaming the MSQ Thursday night Chocobo racing as well. Do giveaways for that too. So all kinds of different stuff going on there. Also follow me on Twitter. Have my own Discord called the Popoto Pub Final Fantasy XIV Final Fantasy XIV community. You can find the link to that on YouTube if you're listening to that here as well. So hope to connect with you all sometime soon. And I hope that everyone has a great rest of your day, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for making us part of your day. Lolly ho, everyone. And peace out.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Popoto Pub. please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more episodes. Take care, everyone, and peace out.